Welcome in episode 2, West Coast Bias. Jason Sukanik, Andrew Nemec. Little podcast here for you West Coast football enthusiasts. Feeling good about this one today. Coming off a fresh beard trim. I got my best Triple H look going. We recently took some photos for the for 1080 The Fan, or I guess 105.1 The Fan, my normal job. And the great Dwight James of Portland, I guess the Godfather, he commented, he said, I was looking very Triple H-esque.
Okay.
And I wasn't certain if that's like because he's like a big wrestling guy. I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And then he responded again. He goes, no. He goes, that's a good thing. So I'll take that as a compliment. So I'm coming off my fresh trim today. I went to got my lady to kind of to gear me up. It's episode 2, so I gotta look my best. I guess I should have looked my best for episode 1, but that was just kind of like that was the maiden voyage, and now you're getting the true look at the angle. So I'm feeling good. Feeling good, excited to be here. Episode 2 and episode 1, we were covering offense, kind of a preview for Ducks, Huskies, Beavers, and then Niners, Seahawks, or Seahawks, Niners. And we're just going to flip it today, and we're going to do the defensive side of the ball. So you ready to get into this?
Of course, man. Let's dive in.
Yeah. I see that you're going with you're wearing the exact same thing, by the way. I've noticed that. Are you doing like a Steve Jobs thing? Because you're wearing this. You're wearing the same Nike hat, same black T-shirt.
I pretty much I have like 6 of these T-shirts, and I always throw a hat on. This is my current rotation. The other thing is some of my hats, like I have multiple Niner hats. Yeah. I don't want to turn off Seahawk fan with that in the first episodes. So I'm going Niner. I also have a really like beaten up hat that's pretty generic, but it's real beat up. So we're going black hat because it looks a little better than some of the beat up white one that is actually now like brown, once you start like sweating in that thing.
So
yeah, this is the better way to go for now. It's professional enough. You'll probably see me in a polo or two, but generally speaking, black shirt, black hat.
You're wearing the same thing. I gotta ask, what's the black go-to T-shirt? Everyone's got to everyone has the plain black or white like T-shirt. Where do you get yours?
You're not going to like this answer.
Are you Costco?
It's Banana Republic, but it is Costco. It's a Costco 3-pack of Banana Republic.
Banana Republic?
All right. Yeah.
That's at least it's if you haven't listened to my show, you know how I feel about middle-aged men wearing Costco clothes. Just say no.
It's the whole thing.
But Banana Republic, that's legit. It's a legit soft T-shirt. I can go with that.
I get Calvin Klein underwear in the 3-pack at Costco, and these shirts at Costco, and that's it. That's the only Costco clothes I will get.
That's how it starts, though, man. Next thing you know, you're gonna be buying that comfortable quarter zip, and then next thing you know, you're buying some like Skechers Easy Striders, and welcome to middle age, man.
It's how it happens. Decline into a lack of fashion for me, for sure.
All right, so we'll start out Oregon Ducks, and we'll talk about this defense. For all the talk of Oregon's offense, Dan Lanning is a defensive guy, right? Co-defensive coordinator, national championship at Georgia. He's a defensive guy. Comes over, brings Tosh Lupoi with him, who's been there since the beginning. Every coaching roster has turnover, but Lupoi has been there the entire time with Lanning. And this has been a good defense that has gotten better each and every year. And if you look at like Pro Football Focus, it's only one of a handful of teams that actually has a top 10 defense, top 10 offense. So a lot of departures on this defense, but I'm not worried about it. This is going to be a strength of the team. My question with this defense, though, is can it take the next step? I saw they are 32-0 since Dan Lanning has been there when their defense has given up less than 34 points. Wow. Oregon's offense scores. So my question becomes, because this, and we'll get into some position battles and stuff, but this defense is going to be good. And this is very nitpicky because they've been very successful. When you look at the games that Oregon has lost, the 2 games against Washington the year before, you look at the playoff game against Ohio State. Even if you go back and look at the first game against Ohio State, the defense did not play good. The defense gave up a lot of points, just that the offense has bailed them out. Again, this offense is going to score 30-plus points. So in these big moment leverage situations, is this the defense that can finally actually go into one of these games against a Washington, against Ohio State, and not give up 35 points?
Yeah, I think it's a good group. I tend to look at it position by position, or at least level by level. And you look at that defensive line, and you'd think in a traditional year, losing a Jordan Birch, losing a Derek Harmon, Caldwell inside, that those would be major issues. And yet they might have the best 1-2 punch along the edge of any team in America. Mateo Uiagalelei, potential first-round pick, had 10.5 sacks last year, looked great. Tatum Tuioti, the coach's son out of Sheldon High School, had 5.5 sacks last year, but was a pass rush specialist to some degree, in the sense that you could really easily see him elevate. With those two guys on the edge, the real question is who replaces Harmon and Caldwell. And that's the hardest thing to replace on the West Coast. When we talk about the reason there is some East Coast bias, part of it is they grow 320-pound humans.
We don't get them out here
at an accelerated rate. Yeah, we have to rely on the poly pipeline to get that kind of guy, generally speaking. It's going to be interesting to see what they do inside. Bear Alexander is really a key to this defense, especially inside. This is a player who started out, he was recruited to Georgia, goes to USC. In 2023, he was second among all interior defenders in the Pac-12 in pressures with 23. Last year, he played 2 or 3 games into the season and had some issues with the coaching staff. The coaching staff said he didn't work hard. He said he wasn't getting the right reps and the right playing time. And he just ended up kind of bailing on USC.
He basically just quit
and entered the transfer portal. No one questions whether or not Bear Alexander is a good football player. He is. When he's motivated, when he's engaged. We saw it in 2023, second in the Pac-12 in pressures. If he's that guy again, you then have 3 of your 4 who can really push the pocket. Amari Washington is a good player. Aiden Breland was a highly recruited kid. They've got pieces inside. It's just kind of unproven. And I think it all comes down to, especially with just the defensive line here, it's all going to come down to Bear Alexander. And I really think that he is the absolute X factor of the front 7. If he's good, they're going to be really, really good.
Yeah. And he's one of those, football is littered with these guys. If you've ever played, if you followed football and look, I'm not trying to signal out defensive players, but look, defensive players tend to be a little bit more of the erratic, kind of highs and lows. I think it's what makes, defensive. It's the Lawrence Taylor effect. And so Bear Alexander is one of those guys that I'm so with you. Like at this point, he's more of a name. He's more of an enigma than a player. Like,
absolutely.
When he came over to USC, it was like this big monster thing. Like, oh man, they got Bear Alexander, and it didn't really work out. It just didn't. And so even when I watch him play, he leaves me wanting so much more. It's like, even when he's being productive, you look at it and say that could be so much more. And so this comes down to, again, this is where coaching comes in. I don't even think it's about technique or whatever. Can someone in Oregon staff light a fire under Bear Alexander's ass? Because if they do, that's a 1st or a 2nd round pick. I mean, and if they don't, then he goes by the wayside as another really uber talented defensive player that kind of wasted the God-given talents.
No doubt. I think it's that important. I think you clearly have 2 great edge rushers. Can you replace a Derek Harmon? And generally speaking, along the West Coast, 1st-round defensive tackles prove to be hard to replace. Yeah. We shall see. I love the linebacker group, though, and it is interesting. I think PFF did a preseason ranking of the top 10 units in college football at each position group. The D-line and the linebacker group finished 11th. They got honorable mention on PFF. The DBs, and we'll get to them, were in that top 10. And the reason the linebackers are so good is really the return. It starts with the return of Bryce Betcher, who had an 80 grade or better against the run, rushing the quarterback, and in coverage. I think he's overall PFF grade of 89 point something, which was 5th among all college football players. He was absolutely exceptional last year. And I really felt like we saw him evolve. Even during the year, he went from a guy, especially early, who had a lot of talent, obviously a baseball kid, great athlete.
It was a feel-good story.
He was a feel-good story, and you kind of saw him thinking. And it's like, man, if he could just kind of stop thinking about where to go and just go and trust himself, he'd be a great football player. And that light kind of came on last year. And man, there were games where he was flat out special. He's a really good football player. He's a leader of the defense. He's a former walk-on. He's everything you love about college football in the old school world in one player. He's a local kid. Bryce Betcher is the heart and soul of this thing among the linebacker group, and he's got a chance to be an All-American. And then on the outside, obviously, we mentioned Tatum Tuioti, and Devin Jackson's the other one. And Devin Jackson's a kid who, when there was a coaching turnover in his recruiting cycle, a whole bunch of guys were up in the air. And Devin Jackson was the first one. And he's a fast-flying 4-star linebacker, one of the fastest linebackers in the country as a recruit. He was the first guy who, even before they had hired Lanning, was like, I'm all in on this team. I'm staying at Oregon. I love being committed to Oregon. I want to be here. he is a really, you think of those guys who fly around. And the issues with guys that fly around like that is they often miss tackles. His missed tackle rate was like 6.7%. He was one of the surest tacklers in all of college football last year, and he's one of the fastest linebackers in America. If he can expand upon that and expand upon his role and be that guy, and you've got Betcher and Jackson flying around as sure tacklers who can do a little everything, that linebacker group has a chance to be really, really good.
Yeah, and there's only a couple transfers coming in. You look at this defense, it's a lot of guys that are home built. Lanning has really hit the transfer portal hard in his first 3 years. You get into year 4, and I think when you look at it, I think you're now starting to see kind of at least on the defensive side of the ball, you're seeing some of that depth that is coming up. Now they go out and they get arguably the best safety in the transfer portal, and Dylan Thieneman from Purdue. Who's going to be really good. But you look at the rest of this group, and it does feel like this is more of that homegrown talent that's starting to come up. Because I think if you are a big time program, everyone's going to have transfers, but I don't think you want to see it where you've got 7 to 8 starters every year that are brand new to your program.
Yeah, Jalil Florence missed some time last year, but certainly looked the part in limited snaps and previously was really good. But we've got to talk about Dylan Thieneman. I mean, this is a beautiful stretch of football right now at the safety position with Caleb Downs, Perch in Minnesota. He'll be a class of 2027 guy, and Dylan Thieneman. This is a dude who 2 years ago was the national freshman of the year, according to 24/7 Sports. He had 6 interceptions as a true freshman, over 100 tackles, and was really used as a free safety. I think something like 85% or more of his snaps were truly at free safety. Last year, Purdue was so bad against the run that they basically moved him to strong safety. Yeah. And his PFF grade dropped from literally a top 5 player in all of college football to, I think he was in the 70s. He still had over 100 tackles, 0 interceptions. And people went, man, the fall off. There was no fall off at his limited snaps at free safety. He played something like 30 to 40% of his snaps at free safety last year, 50% of his snaps at free safety last year. And that grade was right back up to where it was his freshman year. Oregon can play him in a single high, let him read, react, and go just either lay out pass catchers or go be a ball hawk and pluck it out of the air. I think he's got a chance to be the best safety in modern Oregon history. That's a huge compliment to him. We know about TJ Ward. We know about Patrick Chung. They've had some really good ones who went on to have a lot of success in the NFL. Dylan Thieneman has a chance to be a first-round pick. And really, truly, they needed a guy back there to be that center fielder. They were missing that. I think they like their corner depth. They needed a ball hawking safety. They got the best one. Caleb Downs is exceptional at everything, but if you're just looking for a true cover free safety, Thieneman's better. I mean, he is. He's that special. It's going to be interesting. They bring in Theron Johnson, who is I think an honorable mention Big Ten guy out of Northwestern. Yeah. I love the freshman class, and I know with Oregon's depth, you're always a little afraid to shout out true freshmen.
But Trey McNutt is a guy that he's kind of the Decorian Moore on the offensive side of the ball. The kind of the defensive version that you're hearing people talk about is McNutt.
McNutt and Naheem Offord, Dorian Brew, Brandon Finney Jr., that quartet is maybe the best defensive back haul in America. Naheem Offord and Trey McNutt, to your point, 2 absolutely special, long, great athletes. If they rotate in and they can kind of spell this group and give them some depth, this secondary has a chance to be absolutely, truly, undeniably elite.
Well,
it's not yet together. It's not yet together.
Look at Oregon's schedule. Look, I just think Oregon's going to have another year where if you hate the Ducks, I get it. I understand why, but get used to them. They're not going anywhere. When you look at Oregon's schedule, there is plenty of time for this group to gel.
It's a great point.
I mean, Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State, no offense, but I mean, that's not a murderer's row. Just from a talent standpoint alone, you're going to steamroll into that. I mean, maybe the best offense you might play amongst that group is Montana State, for God's sakes. And then you're on the road at Penn State. That's going to be tough. Penn State, the favorite right now to win the Big Ten. And then so let's say even if you go on the road to Penn State, and this is the game I'm talking about where this is where I need to see the defense kind of elevate, because these are the games that under Dan Lanning that they've given up 35 points. And sometimes you just lose. Every game that they've lost has just been, unfortunately, where the defense doesn't show up. and you struggle. So let's say even if the Penn State game is a struggle, then you get Indiana. We don't know what Indiana has. I'm not ready to say that Indiana every year is this offensive juggernaut. I think they were exposed last year. You got Rutgers, Wisconsin, Iowa. Where's the offensive power there? Minnesota, and then you finish up with USC and Washington, and maybe there's something there. So I think this schedule honestly sets up beautifully for Oregon. Especially from the defensive side of the ball. If you want time to kind of gel and kind of get everything together, and like you said, maybe get some of those freshman guys that by the time we get to week 7, 8, 9 aren't freshmen anymore. Those are impact players. And now we're rolling into the college football playoff. I think this sets up for, I don't know if this Oregon team will be what it was last year, but by the end of the year, I feel pretty confident this is going to be a defense that people aren't going to want to play, and it's going to be a team people don't want to play.
Yeah, and I really do think Bear Alexander, defensive tackle, that whole position is going to have a lot to say about whether or not they beat Penn State. Penn State's got Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, the best 1-2 punch at running back in the country. They haven't been able to throw the ball a ton to their receivers. I don't think this secondary is really staying up at night, panicking about Drew Aller and the receiving core they brought in, because they haven't been good. They're unproven. They brought in a bunch of transfers, but nobody that absolutely puts the fear of God in you. The question is, can Oregon stop the run against a Penn State? If they can, if this group, this front seven, proves to be really stout and up to the task, they could be going into their old rivalries in the Pac-12 with Pac-12 teams, USC and Washington, undefeated. That is not out of the question if the defense gels the way it possibly could.
So let's take a look up at Montlake here. We talked about the Washington offense in year 2 under Jed Fish. And I think there's a lot of hope and excitement there, and there's a lot returning. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, first off, it wasn't good last year. They had 20 sacks. There was no pass rush. They had 20 sacks total. 13 of those came against Eastern Washington and UCLA. So this is sometimes when you see sacks can be, to me, one of the most overrated stats. Like if you have 10.5 sacks, but 6 of them came against the Tallahassee JUCOs of the world, what does that mean? It's the most empty stat in the world.
But and it works both ways, by the way. Offensive linemen, you will get NFL draft analysts who say this center or this guard didn't give up a sack. And it's like, well, right, the team runs a bunch of play action, rolls out their quarterback, and mostly runs the ball.
Yeah.
So that he had 0 sacks. There was a prospect a few years ago, was the number 1 center in terms of fewest sacks allowed. 0 sacks allowed in his career. His pass rushing grade was the lowest in the history of the PFF era. Yeah. He got beat every time. They just got rid of the ball so quick that he never got a sack. So be wary of the sack stat.
But still, 20 over an entire year, 13 against 2 bad football teams. That's not good for Washington. So there was no pass rush. And by the way, this is transfer portal. I think they have potentially 8 starters coming in that are brand new. So I almost look at year 2 with Jed Fish. I think this is almost like starting all over again. I mean, when you look at the offensive side of the ball is different. You bring back some guys, but when you look at this defense, I think this is almost everything. New defensive coordinator coming over from Purdue, bringing in their head coach and bringing in potentially 8 new starters. And it's a whole new defensive scheme. They're going to be running everything from a 3-3-5. It's going to be a non-traditional front. A lot of different looks with a 3-man, and then depending on what you want, anything from that 3-3-5 to a 3-4. But this is, I don't even know what to make of this defense, because I think until we see it, it's a little bit of we put our hands up and be like, it's a new scheme, new coach, new players. What do you make of this?
Yeah, entirely new defensive line, a linebacker group that didn't knock your socks off. I really like the secondary, and I think that's where you start with this. They bring in C.J. Christian, a transfer safety, Takario Davis, who 2 years ago was one of the top 5-6 corners in America. Last year, he stayed at Arizona, even though he went in the portal. And look, uneven. Let's call it uneven. If he returns back to what he was 2 years ago, the Bear Alexander thing, if he goes back to what he was 2 years ago, that he could be an All-American. They've got Prysock back there as well. I love the secondary. The question is just, and it really is, it's not just we brought in transfer portal talent. It's we brought in transfer portal talent, and we're not sure what's going to happen with it.
Yeah,
so I think it's almost impossible to preview this front seven with any feel for any real confidence. I think even they would say, we've got, a group of guys we kind of like, and we're going to see who steps up those first 3-4 weeks of the season. Again, all new scheme, all new players. The entire D-line that wasn't very good is gone. It's a whole new D-line this year. No. I don't really know what to make of it. I know, they talk about the fact that they've got some projected starters who have been in the program a few years now, or a couple of years now, and a lot of them have just been backups. And you go, okay, well, they've had time to season. Well, if they were backups last year, that's a little bit of a concern because that group couldn't really get much done. So it's going to be really interesting. I think this Washington team has a chance to be good. There's just a lot of like, hey, I'm not real sure about that offensive line, but I like some of the pieces. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you go, I really like the secondary, but I'm not real sure about the D-line. This season will go as the trenches go for Washington. Yeah. If they figure it out along the offensive and defensive line, they've got a chance to win 8 or 9 games. If they don't, I think Washington fan ends up being a little bit frustrated come the end of this season.
Well, I know 2 guys that they were trying to count on that were both basically coming off an entire year of injuries. The Zach Durfee and Russell Davis. Durfee last year looked like he looks like the guy you want to get off the bus first, but he injured both of his toes. So he basically didn't play last year almost at all because he's battling 2 big toes. So they're hoping that he's back in time. And then Russell Davis was another guy that they had their fingers crossed. And they just found out, I guess we found out all together, Big Ten Media Day, he suffered a knee injury during summer training. So he's out for the entire year. So, I mean, 2 guys that you kind of had your fingers crossed that weren't even starters on the depth chart, but you were hearing from people that you dubbed like, hey, these 2 kids, I'm telling you, if they can stay on the field, look out. Well, one of them isn't on the field and isn't going to be on the field. And the other one, we just don't know. I just, of all the teams we're going to preview, this may be the biggest question mark. And I think it's one of the biggest question marks in the Big Ten. What do we do with Washington that's a year removed from playing for a national championship? But it just, I mean, there's nothing left. Brand new coaching staff, 40 players left last year, and a year 2 under Jed Fish. And I think what a lot of this with Washington is, do you just give Fish the benefit of the doubt? That year 2 after what he did at Arizona, or are we giving Jed Fish too much credit? Because outside of that 1 year he had at Arizona, I don't know. The Jed Fish thing is interesting to me because it's like this idea of like, well, there's no reason Jed Fish isn't going to have this thing rolling in year 2. And and I like Jed Fish too. I think it was a nice hire. I just wonder if maybe the Fish thing is enough, because there are just a lot of question marks for this UW team.
I think this year is going to be really telling. And I like to give coaches, especially when they have to hit a whole program reset, I like to give them a couple years. If they show real signs of progress, I think you can say, okay, this was a really, really tall task and they won 8 games. There's a lot to build on. They've got a young quarterback. They've got weapons. If they win 4 or 5 games and we're still going, man, that offensive line and defensive line are terrible, and I don't know the direction of the program, that's a problem. And that's going to speak to how long a leash Jed Fish really has.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. I don't think expectations should be sky high, but stability. I think you need to see this year on both sides of the ball that Jed Fish has this figured out, right? You bring in Walters, who's the head coach at Purdue, now the defensive coordinator. Supposedly good reputation. I mean, it's Purdue. What do you want from him at Purdue? So I just need to see some stability. So to me, if you're a Washington fan and you see improvements on both sides of the ball, and this ends up being an 8-win team, 8-win team, and you're competitive against the better opponents, the Ohio States and the Oregons, I think you take that as a win. And then speaking of stability, down in Corvallis, I'm not certain if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but basically the entire defense comes back. So normally when you bring back an entire defense and it's mostly homegrown kids, I think there's 1 kid from the portal that's projected to even be maybe 2 in the depth chart. That's normally a good thing. But when your defense is bad, is it a good thing that everyone comes back year 2 here with this new regime in Corvallis?
I mean, I have concerns. I mean, they had
I just love the voice. You're like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're really bad and you come back, did it get better? You're like, concerns.
Yeah, and I think some of it is some of the pieces they lost. Andre Jordan Jr., really good corner. They lost Isaiah Chisholm and Melvin Jordan IV, 2 of their better linebackers. And they had the fewest sacks in all of Division I football. 7 sacks.
For an entire year.
For an entire season. It's hard to put that in perspective. Like
you would think a quarterback would fall down 6 times. 7 over the course of an entire season is an alarming number.
If you get 7 from 1 player, there's a possibility that 1 player isn't an all-conference pick.
Yeah.
So, and that's how much they had as an entire team. I mean,
it's not good.
It's not great. And when you look at the offense, and
it's not great. We're trying to. I love when we try.
I'm trying, man.
You're trying to put a positive spin. You're like,
it's putting lipstick on a pig, man. I can squint and see a path forward for the offense. I can with Malik Murphy and the running back situation, and I can see a path forward. I don't really know what to make of this defense. Keith Hayward resigned. Trent Bray, the head coach, said, okay, I'm taking over play calling duties on defense. When you're a new head coach, ideally, you trust your coordinators. We talked about, and I hate to bring it back to Oregon, but we talked about the success of Oregon. And part of that is Will Stein and Tosh Lupoi have really done a great job with both of their sides of the ball. Lanning definitely has say on defense, but he trusts his staff. What that tells me is that Trent Bray doesn't trust what's going on the defensive side of the ball. If you take it over in year 2 as a head coach, you've got a lot of responsibility, especially now. You're trying to keep guys in your program and you're trying to figure out a rebuild. You're trying to recruit. If you're saying, hey, I better just take this thing over, that concerns me. I think Trent Bray is a good mind on the defensive side of the ball, but that front 7 is not good. And the secondaries gonna give up a lot of yards. I mean, it's a tough look at defense. And I'll be honest, I went into today and wanted to do like a real deep dive of their defense. So just as a refresher, I kind of went over everything and I tried to almost pros and cons it because I am the guy who everyone says is so negative about the Beavers. So I'm trying to map something out that I can feel good about. I couldn't. I really couldn't get there. I think all 3 units, the D-line, linebacker, and the secondary, are going to struggle a little bit. I love that they brought back Skylar Thomas. Skylar Thomas was the leading tackler last year. He did a nice job. I really like Dexter Foster. He's a Central Catholic kid who is young in that program, but is blossoming. I think keeping him, he's got a chance to be a good football player. I just don't see impact when it comes to getting after the quarterback. And if you can't get after the quarterback and you also aren't real stout against the run, that's trouble. I know I've read some things that Oregon State's excited about some of the transfers they brought in Kai Wallen and Walker Harris. Those 2 dudes in their entire career had like 4 sacks. And 3.5 of them came against FCS competition. Kai Wallen has a total in his career of 5 tackles and half a sack. And it's like, well, there's our impact pass rusher. Where? When? So it's going to be an uphill battle. And as much optimism as I had about the offense earlier this week, I'm really worried about this.
Yeah, Nico Taylor's coming back. He's their leading, 7.5 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks. I think they like that. Takari Hickle is a guy that was hurt last year. They think he can come in and do something along as an edge rusher. But you're right. It's just, we talked a little bit about UW stability, and I think that's what you're looking for at Oregon State. And it's a rough schedule early, but it does get better as the season goes on. So, unfortunately for Oregon State, again, maybe take your lumps early and then you try to rebound. And again, just get some footing here as you look forward to next year when you do go into the Pac-12. I just don't think you can go into the Pac-12 next year coming off a season that was like last year's. Trent Bray, when we talked about Jed Fish, and I think, anytime you're going into year 2, year 3 of a program, you need to show progress. And Trent Bray was the guy that stayed behind, right? I'm not going Jonathan Smith. I want to be here. I'm a Beaver for life. My dad was here. All those good things. That's great. All that is fine. But remember, Paul Wolf did that at Washington State. I don't care that you went there. I don't care that you love the university. If you can't get the program on even footing, then what does it matter that you played there and that you have some lineage in that? You've got to start showing some progress. I just think it's a big year for Bray because, again, we hear things behind the scenes. I'm just not certain that Bray right now, I don't know how you can say if you're an Oregon State fan that you feel great that Bray is ultimately the guy. And I think
and behind the scenes, you're not hearing that.
No, and that's
really important to highlight that behind the scenes, it's not good. Like the the buzz about where the direction of the program is not positive. The one thing I will say, and you mentioned that they start really rough. Yeah. It's going to speak volumes about his leadership. And this is in no way a subtle shot. I literally mean exactly what I'm saying.
Keep it together.
We're going to find out how good a leader he is because they probably are 1-3, 0-4. And that fan base is not going to be happy with that because it's going to culminate in a blowout loss to Oregon in game 4, I would assume. Can he keep them together? Will kids do the Bear Alexander and step away and say, hey, I'm just going to enter the portal and I'll use this as a redshirt year? If that's the case, it unravels extremely quickly. If he can keep it together, there is potential for that second half to lead to a lot of optimism heading into the Pac-12
season. I mean, because after Oregon, you got Houston, App State, Wake Forest, Lafayette, Washington State twice, Sam Houston, and Tulsa. Look, there's wins. You just have to weather. And it can't be bad. Cal, Fresno State, Texas Tech, you can't get blown out in those games. You have to be competitive because if that gets early and you lose 2 of those or you lose 3 of those and they're ugly, you mentioned you're going to go into Eugene. They're going to hang 50 on you. They just are. I mean, last year, what was it? 40, 49 to whatever. I mean,
14, I think. And they just called off the dogs.
And they called off the dogs. Lanny's not looking to embarrass anyone, but that could have been 70 if they want. So you can't have those first 3 weeks. It's like you're getting jabbed, right? You're sitting there, jab, jab, jab. The big left hook is coming, and you can't get knocked out by the left hook. You can't be beat up going into that. And so it's weird to say, but I don't even know if necessarily wins and losses in those first 3 are the big ones. It's just the way you play.
Yeah,
because at this point, the gap between Oregon and Oregon State is going to be so great. I'm just not certain that you can really judge a whole lot off of the Civil War. Because that's probably going to be a bloodbath. But if you're playing well, you can dismiss that game and be like, well, that's one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country. And you can move past that. So, I mean, I just make the argument those first 3 games are a lot more important than that fourth one. And I know you don't want to hear that as an Oregon State fan, but I just think the way you view that rivalry is going to have to change.
Yeah.
Unless something drastic happens in the Oregon State program, that's just not going to be a competitive game year after year.
Well, and it's hit them so hard. Like you can say they've had uneven years, and generally they've been competitive. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. There aren't many 28-0 against Air Forces in their modern history. No. This has hit them very hard, very quickly, where there are weeks where they just are not competitive against teams that you thought they would be. I really thought competing against the Mountain West that they would be kind of the big boys of the Mountain West. Even last year with some of the transfers they had and some of the ways that they were coming in and some of the pieces they added, you thought, okay, they've got a chance that, outside of the best teams in the Mountain West, they're going to be right up there because they've had a history where they've had Pac-12 facilities and they've had Pac-12 recruiting, and they went in and immediately fumbled that lead over those Mountain West schools that they played and looked like a mid to lower Mountain West team. They can't look like that again this year.
Big year. All right. Flipping the script here. We covered our little college here. Now we're going to move up. We'll stay in Seattle, I guess. We just done with the Huskies, but we'll talk about the varsity squad there with the Seahawks, and then we'll move on to the Niners. I really like, I think I'm more optimistic and I have been more optimistic because I've really liked Geno Smith, and I think Seattle is a better team than people give him credit for. And I think year 2 under Mike McDonald, I'm not certain. So I've always gone into the last couple of years thinking, hey, I like Seattle's offense. I think it's got a chance to be really good. And then the defense for me was always the one where I was like, we'll see what happens. This is kind of flipped here. Yep. I don't know if I love the Seahawk offense. I'm actually kind of nervous about it. I don't love 30-year-old receivers and Cooper Kupp. I'm not certain about Sam Darnold. The offensive line scares me to death. But when I look at the Seattle defense, this is where I'm bullish. You knew when you hired Mike McDonald that would give you a bump. One of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. And when I look at 2 of these groups, I'm not sure which one I like more, but I look at their defensive line and I look at their secondary. And if I'm a Seahawks fan, I get excited about both of these. And if Byron Murphy can pop year 2, as I thought he had a nice rookie campaign, but if he can cake that next step, and you put him with Leonard Williams and Jerron Reed and Murphy pops, I think this has a chance to be a truly elite front for Seattle. And then, by the way, you throw in DeMarcus Lawrence. He's old at this point over the hill, but if that guy can give you something, very excited about this front.
Yeah, the front's dangerous. And you go back and look at last year, and really you'd say, and we're still probably saying, that linebacker group is their weakest part.
100%.
But
that's the one part I don't like.
In the middle of last season, they traded for Ernest Jones. And then after week 10, they gave up fewer than 19 points per game. They were a really, really stout defense. And that's with Byron Murphy not yet blossoming. That's without Lawrence in the fold. He's now in the mix. I love their front. I think they have a chance to be absolutely dominant. And if Murphy takes the step, he flashed. And I know people kind of want their rookies to be superstars right away. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it takes time. And if he takes the next step, and he did flash that he could take that next step, and you've got Murphy, Williams, Lawrence, and Reed up front, that is scary. That is really scary. You look at the secondary, Devin Witherspoon, the nickel corner. I loved him. He was my number one corner in the draft a couple of years ago when they got Smith and Jigba and Witherspoon in one draft. It was a phenomenal draft, in my opinion. Witherspoon's one of the best corners in all of the NFL against the run. He's a great cover corner. You've got Julian Love, who's a young, nice piece at safety. You draft Nick Emanwari. He's one of the most athletic players in the draft, along with Jalen Milroe and Elijah Arroyo. You want to talk about tone-setting drafts. They went athlete, athlete, athlete. I love, Reek Woolen is an absolute freak out there at his size and his speed. There's a lot to like, and there's potential. And I do worry about Ernest Jones. He's got to stay healthy because we've seen what happens when he's not there. But if he's healthy all year and Byron Murphy takes a step up, it wouldn't shock me at all if we're talking about one of the top 5-6 defenses in the NFL. In fact, I think they will be as long as guys stay healthy.
Why don't we give Ernest Jones more respect? I mean, the Rams didn't want to pay him, right? Tennessee pays him. Tennessee gets rid of him because, again, apparently, if you think he was the problem in Tennessee, Tennessee had a lot bigger problems than that. But this is a guy since coming in, and he's only 25 years old, right?
People forget that, yeah.
People forget that. He's a young guy. Comes in his rookie year with the Rams and starts 7 games, 61 tackles, then 114, 145, 138. And then combined between Seattle and Tennessee, he has 134.
Yeah.
Like I just, and I'm not saying he's Roquan Smith, right? When they plugged him in, when he made that addition into that Mike McDonald defense, all of a sudden in Baltimore, it was like, whoa, here we go. I'm not saying he's that same level of player, but you kind of mentioned his impact. I think he is one of those guys, and maybe it's just that we don't value off the ball linebackers anymore outside of Fred Warner, which we'll get to in a bit, because he doesn't get tackles for losses. He's not a sack guy. It's just, it's not what he does. He's kind of in that old school kind of Derek Brooks
downhill linebacker. Yeah.
And we just don't, I don't know why we don't value that, but I think this linebacking core easily is the biggest weakness in Seattle. I think if there is a weakness and not just as starters but at depth, but I think he's the one piece when I look at this linebacking core that I just don't think gets enough respect. I'm an Ernest Jones guy.
Yeah, and I think he's limited, right? And I think he's bad against. He's really not good in coverage, and he's not a pass rusher. He's not going to wreak havoc in the backfield.
No,
so he's not your Fred Warner type. And in the modern NFL, if you have a linebacker in the middle of your defense who's purely a downhill guy, he can get exposed, and there are times where he will get exposed. However, if you have a smart defensive coordinator who knows how to use that piece and you've got an elite tackler, he can elevate your run defense by an entire letter grade. If your front is a B at stopping the run, he can make it an A. If it's a C, he can make it a B. So he's really good at that one thing. Now you have to kind of hide him to make sure he doesn't get stuck on a George Kittle, to make sure this year he doesn't get stuck on Terrence Ferguson, the Rams' second-round pick at tight end, the former Oregon Duck. You're going to have to hide him a little bit, but he elevates you so much on first and second down that why wouldn't you want him? And I do think people think that the NFL is so full of brilliant people, and that's just not true. There are defensive coordinators who are in over their head. And if you get Ernest Jones and you go, oh, we need a modern off-ball linebacker, and you try to force him into a Fred Warner type of role, a Roquan Smith type of role, he's not going to play well. And you go, this doesn't fit us at all. We can't use him. Again, it's fitting your scheme, the personnel, and how important that is in the league. And I think the Seahawks have the proper defensive minds to say, this guy fits what we do. We can put him in this spot, and he will excel in this spot. And because of that, we saw last year, their defense took a big step forward. Now, if the NFC West has a whole offseason to game plan for Ernest Jones instead of him being a mid-season addition, will he get exposed a little more? Maybe. However, the Seahawks aren't exactly complaining about adding Jones into the mix.
No, and when you look at it, I mean, we've seen it. The trend in the NFL, we're going back to running the football. I mean, you know, it is very cyclical, but you are seeing more and more people now that are lining up and we're running the ball. We're seeing more people under center, right? We're going to run play action. We're going to run the ball at you. And Seattle has had a problem over the years in stopping the run. You know, at times it's been absolutely dreadful. So to me, I think we sometimes we fall into this hole of, well, he can't do everything, so we don't want him. Right. All right, this is like in baseball, man. I get it. Like if you give me 35 home runs, you may hit 212. And people are like, oh, he hits 212. Yeah, well, he drives in 70 and he's going to give me 25, 30 home runs. Yeah, would I like a guy that hits 275 and does that? But right. And that's great. But when I do that, it costs me $25 million and his name is Fred Warner. And by the way, there's like 4 of those in all of the NFL. There just isn't a lot of true 3-down linebackers anymore that are great in coverage and they can tackle and can run and can rush the passer. So what's wrong with being a specialist? It's like, you know, when I go see Miss America, it's a pretty contest. Why does she have to answer all these questions? What's wrong with being a specialist? I like Ernest Jones. I just think he gets a bad rap. And when you saw him come into Seattle last year, that defense, especially against the run, made a big jump. Yep. And so yeah, he'll be that guy that'll drive you crazy. But if it's not Ernest Jones, where else are you going in this linebacking core? And you go find me some better linebackers, but this is by far the biggest question mark on this Seattle defense.
Well, it's funny because I think they're different players and they're different positions even. But it almost feels like Jamal Adams and Ernest Jones are, you know, like Ernest Jones needs Jamal Adams' PR team, like to sell him as just this special talent, because Jamal Adams is really, really, really limited in what he can do.
Exactly, he can't coverage anyone, and yet like we made him out to be the end all to be all. They gave up 2 first-round picks for him, which is why I'm saying I like Ernest Jones. I don't want to give up 2 first-round picks for him. I'm not trying to make him out to be this all-pro, but you know, people that bash him because he's bad in coverage or that he gets exposed. George Kittle exposes a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with getting beat, but you're gonna get beat by George Kittle. George Kittle really good.
Yep.
You know, but that's why hopefully you have some elite safeties behind him. And again, you can run some schemes to try to prevent that. Like you have one of the brightest minds in the NFL, and you give me a guy that can give me 130 tackles and stop the run. Well, on 3rd and long and on play action situations, I'll make sure that I give him some help over the top,
or get him off the field.
Right, get him off the field, and maybe. And Wuso, if he can stay healthy, I know that, that's a big question for him too. And some of this is just health, right? Yep. You know, it's just, but the NFL is a war of attrition. It just is. So that's another one too, when he's not in camp right now and still trying to recover from an injury. But that's another guy that I think they really need to get healthy, because that's not only do they not have big playmakers at linebacker, but there's not a lot of depth too. So that's the one position group they can't afford injuries.
Yep. You're right.
Switching over to the San Francisco 49ers, because again, so much with the 49ers, we talk about offense, but when the Niners are good, it's when their defense is elite. And this looks nothing like the 49er defenses when they were truly elite, with the exception of, hey, we got our defensive coordinator back. They took a little hiatus. He comes back now at Robert Saleh. But when you look at this, I think about those 49er defenses, I think about that front. I mean, think about all the draft capital they spent on that defensive line and just how good and deep it was. And over the years, it's been eroded. And now when I look at this defensive line, it's a lot of like rookies and Nick Bosa.
Yeah, it's a scary group, man. It's really interesting to look at the way this thing has evolved for the Niners. I think the starting point with the Niners is the way everybody talks about them and says they were bad last year. They were terrible against the run, and they lost 3 massive pieces in Talanoa Hufanga, Mooney Ward, and Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah.
It's really important to point out none of those 3 guys played at all last year. They didn't play. Greenlaw was hurt. He came in and got hurt again, and he's out for this season now. So they kind of dodged a bullet. I hate that, because if you're a Niner fan, you love Dre Greenlaw and what he's done for that franchise. Great. Mooney Ward barely played last year. Talanoa Hufanga finally came back from a knee injury and immediately broke his forearm. So they lost 3 pieces that they were paying, that didn't actually play last year. So
No.
it's really important to preface that with that, because outside of Deebo Samuel, their losses are not really, they're big names, they're marquee names. They weren't really impact players last year. Well, how did they solve their issues? Because they were terrible against the run. They drafted Alfred Collins from Texas in the second round. They draft CJ West out of Indiana in the fourth. CJ West is one of the best. He's not going to push the pocket in terms of the pass rush, but he's one of the best run defensive tackles in all of last year's draft. In the mock drafts I was doing, I took CJ West for the Niners every single time in the third or fourth round. So that was a great pick.
Like, he's one of these guys, by the way, as a former center guard, I hated playing the CJ West of the world. He's 6 foot and he's like 320 pounds. You can't move the damn guy. Like you said, doesn't do a whole lot, and he's not going to rack up a bunch of stats, but he will be a guy in the middle that you just plug his big ass in there and no one can move him. I hated playing against guys like that.
They've been trying desperately to find an answer for the guy opposite Nick Bosa. We all know how all-world Nick Bosa is, and they've tried various iterations, and it hasn't worked. It made so much sense for them to take Mikael Williams. He's young. He was hurt last year, played through injury. They know he's passionate about the game. He's great against the run. He might have been the best first-round edge rusher against the run. The pass rush is developing, but you believe in the youth, you believe in the athleticism, you believe he can take a jump. Again, you've got Alfred Collins and CJ West inside. And when you look at it, you go, that's relying a lot on young talent up front. And the model is pretty clear. It's another team from the NFC West. They're hoping that they have a similar jump to what the Rams have done with the past couple of drafts. They took a Kobe Turner, a Byron Young, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, all guys they took in the last couple of years who elevated their front. They went from being not very good. They had a lot of weapons on offense. Obviously, Puka Nacua kind of emerged out of nowhere and was special, but they invested on offense. Kyron Williams, Matthew Stafford. And then they took a lot of flyers on defense and said, if our defensive overhaul works with these draft picks, we're going to be pretty good. Well, they hit on all of them. Kobe Turner's really good. Byron Young's really good. Jared Verse is exceptional already. That's what the Niners need. And if we're being honest, Suk, the Niners need almost that hit rate. They could maybe miss on one. They need almost that level of hit rate to be a good defense, to be a truly good defense this year. They do. You look at what it is right now. It's their starting lineup is Mikael Williams, Kevin Givens, Jordan Elliott, and Nick Bosa up front. If that's the case, that would mean Collins and West didn't step up. Yeah. That's the worst defensive tackle duo in the NFL.
Not good.
If it's Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens, that's the worst defensive tackle duo in the NFL. And you can talk to me all day long about Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. But if that's what you have inside, it's a rinse repeat from last year in terms of not being able to stop the run. So they need those rookies to be good. In the linebacker core, you've got Fred Warner. That's the good news. The bad news is there's questions at outside linebacker. I loved Nick Martin. I took Nick Martin as a sleeper, Nicholas Martin, and Nick Martin, depending on how you want to, out of Oklahoma State. A couple of years ago, blazing fast, flew around, great football player. Last year, hurt a little bit, dinged up quite a bit throughout the year. But if he returns to that form, I love him. The problem is most people projected him as a 6th or 7th round pick. You don't get to just plug and play your 6th or 7th round pick and, hey, this linebacker was really fast 2 years ago and expect him to be a stud day one. They're relying on a tremendous amount of youth. And that is a scary thing. I like Diamador Lenore at corner. I do like their corner situation. Then you get to safety, and they're literally having essentially open tryouts. They signed like 6 safeties. Yeah. Jair Brown out of Penn State last year, or a couple years ago, was a 3rd-round pick, has not lived up to even the 3rd-round hype. He's not been very good. Malik Mustafa was an absolute find in last year's draft. He tore his ACL in the last game of the season. Yeah. He might not start the season playing. He might not be able to play.
No, I think he's on. I think right now, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think he's on the PUP list. I mean, he's not.
He is now. Yeah. There's some question about whether he can come back week 1. I don't think so. But I'm purposely doing this in kind of a stacked long way to just say safety's a question. Both outside linebacker spots are a question. Edge rush opposite Nick Bosa is a question. Both defensive tackle spots are questions. And yes, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan went into this draft and went, let's address all of those issues. When's the last time a team had a hit rate, by the way, from day one, go, where they hit on 6 rookies that they can plug and play as starters and go, oh, well, now it works. It's unlikely to work that way.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just expecting Robert Saleh to come back and just give you a bump because Robert Saleh is such a good defensive coordinator. But again, it's so much of this is Jims and Joes. Like if you don't have the bodies, I mean, I'm sure Saleh will give you a bump, but you have to have some pieces. I will say, I mean, we're like 3 days into camp. I will say that Williams is getting the Aldon Smith comps. I mean, they say that he has looked like the best player. Now, again, take it for what it's worth. The first couple of days of camp drive me nuts. Too many balls on the ground, or Malik Neighbors is uncoverable. Oh my God. Really?
Remember Malik Neighbors last year? It was that, wasn't it Malik Neighbors who they said he couldn't see the ball very well because there isn't that white line on a football like there is in college. Yeah. And so he was having a hard time with drops in camp.
Just please stop with camp. Like, I like to point out that I looked good the first couple days in camp and I got exposed real fast. Like the first couple days of camp mean nothing. But if you, I will say this, I've talked to plenty of guys that played a lot longer than I did and were actually good NFL players, unlike me. But I felt this way in college. I felt this way in NFL. And I feel this way when you're watching. You can find dudes really early on. Right. There's guys that are slow builders, right? There's guys that kind of come out of nowhere in year 2, year 3. You're like, oh man, that you kind of grow and develop. Like you said, not everyone comes in as a rookie and just it pops. But when you have a guy, when you have a dude, it takes very little time. I'm trying to remember. I was listening to, remember who I was listening to? It was Mercedes Lewis, 20 years in the NFL.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Tight end. And I was listening to him. He was doing an interview. I think it was with Colin Cowherd. And Colin asked me, he said, after all this time, he goes, how long does it take for you to see someone that's going to be special? And he said, padded practices 2. He goes, you give me pads and I'm really going against someone. He goes, you will know, like when Nick Bosa shows up, you will know within a day or two that Nick Bosa is not just a guy. And at least early on, if you want a positive sign from 49ers camp, your first round pick that you took that you needed to be a dude that had a lot of question marks coming out of Georgia. I mean, you saw some people that said he was a top 5 player and some people said he wasn't. He was a borderline first round pick. Right. Supposedly, the first couple of days of camp, he has looked like a dude. And other players and media members that have seen him say that right now looks like the best player on the field. Does that mean that he goes in and is all world as a rookie? No, but I think that you're getting those reports, or that you are getting them so early on. I think that is a good sign. I think that's a great sign.
And if he's above average against the run, and he should be, that he projects at that, that tends to carry over from college, and he was elite against the run. Yeah. If he's that guy and he can give you 6.5 sacks, that's not a huge number. Yeah. If he can just give you 6.5 sacks and scare you enough that you do have to kind of worry about the side opposite Bosa, that's a successful rookie season. And in fact, that's more than a successful rookie season. That means he hit. Yeah. So we also have to temper expectations a little bit, where it can't be double-digit sacks or bust. He was a guy who was considered an elite run defender who was progressing as a pass rusher. So expect progress as a pass rusher, and for the defense to be a little more stout against the run. That's a win. I really liked him. I love that pick. I love what they did with Alfred Collins and CJ West. That duo makes sense. Again, it just goes back to
a lot of hits.
You have to hit, and you have to hit at a historic level. This draft has to be 4 or 5 wins. And last year's draft was largely 4 or 5 wins. And doing that back-to-back years, because you went 2020 through 2023 and just absolutely failed to get anything out of your drafts outside of Brock Purdy, whenever that was, whatever draft that was, is a problem. And now they're suffering for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for episode 2. Nemec, always appreciate you. And we'll be back on Monday, and we'll actually have, by that point, we'll have a week of NFL camp. So maybe next week we get into a little more of some NFL stuff, because we're actually going to have some, look, as I stated, first week of training camp, first couple weeks, take everything with a grain of salt. but at least we're getting some real news coming out of NFL camps. We're in college. We're just still finishing up with media days, and we're just kind of scratching the surface. So maybe we flip it and we'll start with some NFL stuff first. Maybe we touch upon, we got some Rams, got some Charger stuff. I mean, there's a lot of good West Coast football right now.
No doubt.
Especially in the NFL, it's going to be some competitive ball and a lot of questions coming out of the West Coast. So join us Monday. We'll have a new pod coming out. And again, we're going to try to do this every Monday, every Friday. So tell your friends if you're a West Coast football enthusiast. And by the way, we won't ignore the rest as we get into the season. When there's big games involving teams from non-West Coast teams, or they're playing it, we will end up kind of having a broader view. We just want to focus on, especially early in the offseason, we're going to give some love to our West Coast brothers because we get ignored out here on the West. And as Dan Lenny says, that little team out West, we do play some good ball out here, and we're going to cover some good ball out here. So like, subscribe, wherever you listen to your podcast, tell a friend, send it to someone, repost it, follow us, all that good stuff. And hopefully we keep doing good content for you. And Nemec, and we will see you Monday for episode 3 of West Coast Bias.
Thank you very much.